It's one thing to start a few seeds here and there, but it's an entirely different thing to start an entire garden worth of seeds all at the same time. Keeping everything organized, trying not to take up too much space with all of your trays and pots, and getting it done quickly are all things that all growers have to deal with at some point. I've done this for a few years now, and every year I get faster and faster and more efficient with what I'm doing. This year I finally feel like I have it down to a point that it's reasonable. A few years back it would take me 3 whole days to plant my peppers, and here I am this year. It took me about 3 hours and I planted about twice as much as I normally do. So stick around, I'm gonna show you guys how I plant my seeds and keeping it as quick and efficient as I possibly can. Real quick, before we get started, I wanted to ask you guys a question today. What is the #1 mistake you've made while gardening? I know what mine is, and it was pretty bad, and it almost ruined an entire season for me. I'm really curious to hear what your guys' mistakes are. So go down, leave your mistakes down in the comments. I want to read them. I will read every single one, and depending on the comment, I might be featuring it in a future video. Let's go ahead and get these seeds planted. Today I'm going to be using seed starting mix, seedling trays, 10-20 trays, humidity domes, and a heat mat. These are all equally as important, and as we go through the steps, I will tell you exactly why they are important. Links to everything I'm using here today will be down in the description below, so go ahead and go check that out as soon as this video is over. The very first thing I want you guys to do is if you're getting ready to plant and you don't have a seed list of exactly what you're planting yet, pump the brakes a little bit. For me, I use an Excel sheet, and on that Excel sheet, I just pretty much put the type of pepper that I want to grow, how many of those plants that I want, how many seeds I'm going to plant, and I also write the heat level just so when I'm planting I am not just growing all super hots. I pretty much make that mistake every year. I grow all super hots and then I find myself wanting some lower heat peppers. So that's another thing to think about. So find a place where you can at the very least put the type of pepper you want to grow and how many of those plants that you want. Bare minimum, that's what you should be writing down. You should not be going to plant your seeds without knowing the exact number of the seeds that you're going to plant. Today, I'm planting 288 seeds. I know that because I wrote it down on my Excel sheet. So I know exactly how much seed starting mix I need. I know how many seedling trays I need, how many 10-20 trays. I know all of it before I even go to the table to start planting. The second thing I do is I create my labels. So I'm old school in the fact that I want physical labels for all my plants. I know that it's super easy to just do it on the computer and make a kind of a map of what you're going to be growing. For me, I like to have physical labels on everything so I don't, mess up, or if my computer crashes, I don't lose it all, stuff like that. So what I do is I just take the jumbo popsicle sticks. I think they're called jumbo craft sticks or large craft sticks. They'll be in the link in the description. But I take these sticks, I break them in half, and I make those my labels. So what I do is I take my list that I've made, and for every one plant that I want to make that label. You're hanging out with the kids and they're watching Little Baby Bum on Netflix. You can sit down and make your plant tags, and that's pretty much what I did because I had to make 144 plant tags is what I ended up having to make. Before I even sat down to start planting, I already had all these plant tags ready. The plant tags take just as long to make as it does to plant all of your seeds, and you might as well just get it done before you even come to the table. So like I said, today we're using seed starting mix, and there's a couple reasons for that. In the past, I've used just like normal potting soil to start my seedlings, and what ends up happening is there's all these big chunks in the potting soil, and when the seeds try to come up, they're gonna get stuck underneath those chunks of bark or sticks and twigs, whatever it might be. When they go to sprout, they're gonna get stuck underneath all that stuff. And there's quite a few times where I almost lost seedlings where I had to just kind of pick stuff off of the top of that. I would imagine that I've had lower I've had lower germination rates because of using potting mix rather than seed starting mix, just because of how big of chunks are in there. Today I'm just using the Miracle Grow brand, nothing too crazy or special. And I'm only gonna need 1 bag of this stuff today. So I'm gonna go ahead and just dump it into a tote, and I'm gonna moisten it up real quick. You don't want it too wet, but you don't want it dry either, because what'll happen if it's dry, you'll put it into your little seed cells, and then when you go to water it, the water's gonna get stuck right there on that top little section. It's happened to me one time, and it was one brand, so so I'm not saying this will always happen, but for me, I pre-moisten it, because if not, that water just floats on top of that dry seed starting mix, and it just becomes a nightmare. And it's just easier to work with if it's a little damp. Take your seedling trays, and I picked these seedling trays because there can be 72 that fit in one 10-20 tray. So there's 6 seedlings that fit in each little tray. I can put 12 of those inside my 10-20 tray. So at the end of the day, I've got 72 cells within my 10-20 tray. 10-20 trays are awesome if you don't really know too much about them. What you do is you put all of your smaller trays inside that larger tray, and then once your seeds start sprouting and everything, what you do is you just pour your water when you go to water them, you don't have to water from the top. You pour the water into the 1020 tray, and then they take up that water from the bottom of the tray. You kind of keep the top of your soil nice and dry. Everything gets watered from the bottom, and it's just quicker, more efficient, and overall just much, much easier to handle. So go ahead and fill up your seedling trays, all of them. All the seedling trays that you need to fill up, go ahead and just fill them up now, so that way you don't have to go back and forth. So like I said, for me, I'm doing 144 plants today, but I'm planting 288 seeds, and I'll get to that here in a little bit. But for every one plant that you want, fill up one cell. For me, I'm gonna fill almost 2 complete 1020 trays. All right, so now we've got all of our trays filled with seedling mix, and just to keep everything organized and make sure we don't mess up, let's put our plant tags in now. So however you wanna organize this, what I ended up doing is I took all of my more mild peppers and I put them into one of the 1020 trays, and then I put all of my super hots into another 1020 tray. And the reason for that was because a lot of times your super hots, they're gonna take a lot longer to germinate. And so if you have them all in the same tray, what'll end up happening is your more mild peppers are gonna come up quicker, and then you've got that humidity dome that's in the way, and you gotta rip it off, and then you have to worry about keeping everything nice and moist while your super hots are still germinating. So get all of your plant tags in each one of your cells, and let's get ready to plant some seeds. All right, so at this point we have one more step before we plant our seeds, and that is just taking like a permanent marker or a pencil or a pen or spoon, whatever it might be, and just make little indents everywhere you want a seed. For me, I put 2 seeds in every single cell, so that way if I don't have a very good germination rate, at least I'm gonna have all these extra plants. So planting double what you actually want helps at the end, because if they don't all germinate, you still have plants that you can save your grow with. So go around, I'm putting 2 indents in every single cell. When you make these indents, only go about 1/8 to 1/4 inch deep. You don't want it very deep, just a little bit deep, just under the soil level. All right, now you want to find all of your little seed bags with all of your seeds that you're gonna be planting today. Let's get ready to actually plant them in these seed cells. So for this step, what I use is I use a plastic spoon, and for me, this just helps me not drop seeds all over the place, just kind of keeps it nice and easy to maneuver. So I'll take the bag with the seeds and I'll pour them into a plastic spoon, and then I'll place the seeds in those little indents. So after you get your seeds inside those little indents that we made, you want to take the soil that you kind of pushed up when you made the indent and just kind of cover the seeds. And what this does is as you're moving through your tray, you're going to be covering up the seeds as you go. If you lose your place, take a break, anything like that, you can come back and you're going to see that, oh, the next seed cell that has indents are these ones, so that's where I'm at. If you cover those seeds up as you go, you're not going to lose your place on where you're at. If you do come to a point where you just can't quite get the seed covered, then just take some extra seed starting mix and kind of sprinkle it on top there. It's not a big deal. Every once in a while, you might need to borrow a little bit of seed starting mix. Hey, real quick, if you're getting value out of this video, go down and hit the like button. That'll help me out a lot. All right, at this point, if you had your seed starting mix damp in the first place and then you got all your seeds planted, what I do is I just go through and I mist the top of those seeds. And you want to make sure you have a good saturation throughout the soil. If it's too dry, what can happen is your seeds won't germinate. If it's too wet, they can start to mold, mildew. You can start having issues with, the seeds just rotting and not germinating that way. So now we want to put the humidity dome on. This is something that's important, is some humidity domes come with a little vent at the top, and it's a little circle. It's got some holes, and you can close those holes. Some do not, and those holes are pretty important. The ones that I have are just the cheaper ones, and they didn't come with holes, which is totally fine. But what I did is I drilled about 3/4 inch holes in the top of my humidity dome, and then I took just some masking tape and I covered those holes up. And what that's going to do is when these seeds are finally sprouting and I have to pull that humidity dome off, I'm not just going to shock the plants by pulling that humidity dome off and calling it good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take that tape off and let them start to breathe for a few days before I actually pull that humidity dome off. And it's gonna just kind of help them acclimate from that super high humidity environment to whatever environment is in your grow tent or your grow area. So you've got your ventilation holes, you've got your humidity dome on. We need to get these seeds on a seedling mat. And it is very important to put your seeds on a seedling mat that heats them up, because they're only gonna germinate if they're between about 80 to 90 degrees. If you're lower than that, you're gonna have a horrible germination rate. And if they're higher than that, you're gonna cook them. I got this huge seedling mat that can fit like 4 or 5 1020 trays, and I laid it out in my tent. And this seedling mat also comes with a thermostat. So what I do is I take that thermostat probe and I put it through one of the holes that I drilled, and I put it down into the bottom of one of those seed cells. And what this will do is now it's gonna allow us to set the temperature. I'm setting it to about 85 degrees. We're gonna set the temperature, and then as soon as that soil comes up to that temperature, it's gonna kick that seedling mat off, so that way it doesn't burn them, and then it'll kind of fluctuate a little bit within a few degrees, but It's going to keep the seeds the temperature they're supposed to be. I'm very hesitant to ever just use one of the seedling mats that says it raises the temperature 10 degrees, or anything that doesn't have a thermostat. I don't trust. So I want to know exactly what the temperature of my seedlings are going to be. I'm going to set it to 85. I'm going to put the probe in, and that is going to manage that right there at the 85 range. If you ever find yourself getting a seedling mat that doesn't have a thermostat, it might be a good idea to buy a thermostat separately. They're all over Amazon. I'll link some of those below as well. I'll also link the seedling mat that I got that comes with the thermostat. It's awesome. It makes everything really easy. All right, so now we just have to wait a few weeks for these seedlings to start sprouting. And once they start sprouting, you really want to keep an eye on it. Start maybe pulling some of that masking tape off so they can breathe a little bit. But you don't want to pull that humidity dome off once you start seeing them sprout. Once you get a good number of them, 60-70% of those seeds have sprouted, start ripping off your masking tape or opening up your vents, letting them breathe, and then you can just pull that humidity dome off. But you want to wait until most of them have sprouted. If you don't wait until most of them have sprouted, what'll end up happening is you'll have to just moisten that every day to keep it wet, because if you don't keep it wet, they're not going to sprout. As soon as all of our seedlings sprout, we're going to let them grow for a few weeks, and then at that point, we're going to move them from these seedling trays, and we're going to move them into their final pot before going out into the garden. And that's going to be a 3.5-inch deep nursery pot. And the deep pots are kind of nice because they give those roots a little bit of extra room for growth. And the 3.5 inch is a great size because you can fit 18 of those 3.5-inch pots into a 10-20 tray. And then whenever you need to water them, you just put water in the bottom of that 10-20 tray and they all just soak that up. So they will stay in the 3.5-inch pots until they go outside into the garden. And then it's also nice to have them in these 10-20 trays, because what ends up happening is everybody has to harden their plants off before they take them to the garden. If you've got these 10-20 trays with 18 of your plants at a time, it is so much easier to move that outside. In the past, I've brought every one out on its own, and that was horrible. I've also had to put them in boxes and try to bring them out that way. But it makes your life so much easier if you use a 10-20 tray. If you use your double cups, still put them in 10-20 trays. It's pretty much the same thing. But use these 10-20 trays. That way when you go to move them around in your tent, or you have to go start hardening them off, you can just move those 10-20 trays around. It makes your life a whole lot easier. They're not that expensive. I think I got like the mega heavy duty, the heaviest of the duties they have on Greenhouse Megastore. Those ones weren't too expensive. And then the ones I got on Amazon, they're also pretty sturdy, and they're actually really, really cheap. So I'll probably link those ones in the description, but I will also show you guys the ones that I got from Greenhouse Megastore. If you'd like to grow along with us as we're going through this process, go over and get your 3.5-inch deep pots ordered and your 10-20 trays, and just be ready to start moving those over to those in the next month or so, depending on when this video comes out. Just be ready to transplant those seedlings over as soon as they get big enough. Starting seeds is seriously probably one of the most exciting times of the year for me. It's a fresh start, a new beginning. This is the first time you're like, oh, the winter blues are almost over. I can actually work out in the garden, because starting those seeds is just the first part of the process, and it's it's so exciting. I really hope that I can help you guys start off your seeds right, and that way you get good germination rates, and you can have a really healthy garden this year. And to get you pumped up for your growing season, go ahead and watch this video here, where I had a huge harvest of my peppers last year. And every single variety that I go and harvest, I give you some really awesome information about each one, and that's the video I watch when I'm missing pepper season. So I hope you enjoy that.